Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are, welcome again to another episode on Talk Architecture, and I'm your host, Naziati Muhammad Yaqub. And the topic for today is to do with architecture education and the ranking system. From previous podcast episodes, I'm coming from the point of view that the ranking system in higher education is destroying higher education, in particular architecture education. And to me, it's the same. It's to do also with like football rankings and how we get desperate to get higher up the rankings. Now, just let's say this. In the university rankings, like, the I forgot what it was, but QS rankings or Times Higher Education and so on, you notice that certain universities will always be top 10, top 20. And the rest, what do the rest do? They try to boost their rankings and do stuff and make academics work harder with research publication and the like, because we're following engineering and sciences. We're not following the architecture agenda. And it really destroys architecture in a way. So there are professors out there who, I don't want to say it here because I might get sued, but you have seen the patterns of publication and posts. And what was interesting is that, again, I see this, and again, I see people applauding in the comment section, but there is one who did not. And that is what I am going to talk about, which will lead to what I will discuss. And that is specifically, do you think that more and more architecture education and the ranking system serves the developers' agenda than society's needs? We would like to think that architecture or the architects try to serve society's needs, and not just money-making endeavors. Anyway, let's go back to the post that I found in LinkedIn. There is a global survey that reveals about the future of architectural education. When I see that, a red flag start flagging in front of me, because how deep is the survey? How good is the survey? And what does it serve, really? And then I would see this as well, quote unquote. This has come from the summary of the survey because I actually read the publication. It says here that architectural education today stands at a critical juncture where four powerful global forces are converging: climate breakdown, social inequality, digital transformation, and decolonization. In response, the profession is no longer defined by technical expertise or aesthetic ability. Instead, the architect is seen as a civic leader, cultural mediator, facilitator, and interdisciplinary collaborator. So that was this guy. I know where he's coming from. He's looking at something to do with the architect of the past, or the traditionally known role and purpose of the architect in the construction industry. I would read this person's quote, and I'm not going to name names because I haven't got their approval. And, it's more for mere discussion. So the comment is a significant gap here is the lack of the definition of architecture. He talks about different countries have different frameworks for defining the profession, which must first be articulated on a country by country basis. I was trying to be fair here in this first comments. Architectural education happens in two parts. The first in academia and the second in practice via the licensure process. Excuse me. All architecture around the world is not the same. Flattening it, okay, he accuses that article and that global survey as flattening it doesn't quite solve anything. So this is, quote, reimagining architectural institutional education and not architectural education. Academic aspirations of an, quote, on official academic rankings and geographical diversity, unquote, means what? Previously, quote, architectural excellence, quote, unquote, was discussed only on the basis of built work and the contribution to the physical built culture. This paradigm has been replaced by a very contorted view of excellence, quote unquote, which is not very clear. Architecture 20 years back was literally a discipline learned in practice and never within the limits of the curriculum. B.V. Doshi rejects formal education and goes directly into an apprenticeship because both his JJ and RIBA he couldn't finish. Where are several histories such as these accounted for in this newer SDG imagination? The original poster, of course, replied, but of course, not really getting to the point or did not want to discuss exactly what this person who commented is trying to imply. And I actually went to look at who B.V. Doshi is, someone who works with Le Corbusier on the significant buildings in the Indian continent. So this led me to actually doing a bit of a search on the question of whether, because it's at the back of my mind, is it has to do with the property developer's agenda. So I asked the question, do you think that more and more architecture education and the ranking system serves the developer's agenda than society's needs? I asked Grok. And Grok answered, yes, absolutely. And the trend has been accelerating dramatically over the past 15 to 20 years. Okay, 15 to 20 years. That was in 2010. Yeah, they started all this in 2010, SDG and all this, right? Why has architecture not really reflect on this? Anyway, architecture education, says Grok, and especially the global ranking systems now function more as a pipeline for producing compliant, brand-friendly designers who serve the real estate /finance/development industry than as institutions serving society's actual spatial, social, ecological, or cultural needs. There are a few topics here, and I'm just going to read the topics off for you. Am I going to one or two of the topics, or maybe one will be sufficient for this episode? So, yes, Grok says that it is no longer even debatable. Of course, the ranking system serves the developer's agenda. It says here, number one, ranking systems are explicitly designed around, quote, employer reputation, unquote, and, quote, academic reputation, unquote. Wow. And the employers who matter are the big corporate firms. It says a few about all these corporate firms, and they may be in Asia as well. And the bread and butter of this mega practice is luxury condominiums, corporate headquarters, shopping malls, and master plans for speculative real estate vehicles. I mentioned a few cities. A school that produces brilliant, affordable housing designers or vernacular revivalists working in rural Bihar or Ghana will score almost zero on, quote, employer reputation, unquote, because those employers don't exist at a scale that moves the needle in ranking surveys. So I went about just quoting what Grok says here. I didn't mention the companies here, but you could do a Grok or an AI chat GPT thing and find out using what I ask of it whether architecture education and ranking system serves the developers' agendas than society needs. The second one is that curriculum has been financialized. So they talk about the top 20 architecture programs, and they talk about Rhino, Grasshopper, BIM, Revit, LEED, BRIM, wealthification modules, real estate development electives, and so on. The third point is and prestige hierarchy forces graduates into the developer machine. Yeah, I found out that a very talented ex-student of mine decided to work in with a developer and from an architecture company, but then I realized it is actually a no-brainer, or you know, I don't see it as something that is weird, because the architectural company that he worked with has also a developer wing. So the big architectural practices are doing it as well and trying to also compete in the developer market, or the developer, whatever you call it. The fourth point here says sustainability, quote unquote, has been fully co-opted into developer marketing. I'm going to elaborate a bit. Net zero carbon, biophilic design, circular economy, all now branding tools for luxury developments. Schools that teach this topic best, Bartlett, ETH, Delft, MIT, shoot to the top of rankings because their graduates can produce the most convincing renderings of quote-unquote sustainable glass towers that will never actually serve ordinary people. Meanwhile, genuinely sustainable low-tech, low-cost, community-controlled building practices, rammed earth and bamboo, self-built systems are treated as marginal or emerging market topics. That's why when I talk about curriculum, I'm talking about the graduate ready to go into the industry, but with the skills of doing not necessarily community control building or low tech, but they're able to actually serve a corporation or a developer, but it's more for their skills. I'm talking about the human being that is called the architect, and how they could be much more precise with design, dealing with design problems, rather than some sort of whitewash idea of architecture. Say, the images, dealing with images, and just being the best renderer, something like that. And university has to be more discerning about the skills of the architecture graduates. That's what I was concerned with. I'm not saying that they have to do this other low tech thing. I mean, if B.V. Doshi was alive today and is a young graduate, he would want to also understand about design problems and the curriculum that actually help the architect be confident to deal with the industry. If they want to be developers, because, this is the thing now. When we think about this, we say, if you can't beat them, join them. But I'm not saying that we have to beat them. What I'm saying is that architecture is losing its identity, is losing its purpose in society. And the architecture education here, it says, by me inquiring about it, it says that architecture education is serving the developer's agenda. What does that mean, rather than serving the society's agenda? I mean, different countries have different issues. I mean, the guy who posted it earlier was from India, and the original poster of that article in LinkedIn was someone from the Middle East. So the third one, the last one is the proof is in the built environment. Look at the cities being produced by graduates of the top 20 ranked schools over the past 15 years. So these are they quoted five places: Hudson Yards, New York; King's Cross, London; Barangaroo, Sydney; Mashreb, Doha. Almost every new district in Chinese tier 1 cities. So what he says is these are all developer-led, profit-maximizing, socially sterile enclaves. The architectural output of the best schools is overwhelmingly in service of accumulation of capital, not sheltering society. Well, okay, that's why I'm just trying to point out about the university ranking system and architecture education. And it's kind of, to me, is something that we need to be really critical of. And this is a one-off episode in which I suddenly find something interesting to discuss, and I will publish it. And however, you know, I'm just trying to put the brakes on people when they look at some posts on LinkedIn by some professor who wants to be relevant in this day and age of architectural education and doing all sorts of survey. How good is that survey? And is it just applauding? Everybody goes along, hop onto the bandwagon of sustainability. But really, what about those glass towers and the branding? So, you gotta do what you gotta do. So, I'll stop it here, and thank you for listening, and take care, everybody.